Hello and welcome to Conversations in Cleantech, the podcast that celebrates the clean tech industry and the people that power it, brought to you by Brightsmith. I'm your host, Jenny Gladman, and across the podcast, I'll be interviewing leaders and entrepreneurs from around the world to explore the opportunities, challenges, and rewards of working in clean tech. From revolutionizing solar panels to overhauling the way we move, in this second season, we'll be exploring the innovations that are sparking sustainable change and fueling a cleaner, greener future, whilst offering some tokens of wisdom to enlighten, engage, and inspire everyone to live their purpose. Today's episode is a first for us. I have a co-host, one of the latest and greatest additions to the Brightsmith team. Marta will be co-hosting today's episode, and who knows, she may be back again.
Hi everyone, it's really exciting to be here co-hosting today's episode, and in all honesty, when Jen told me about today's guest that agreed to be on the show, I didn't give her much of a choice. It was either yes or yes.
So on that note, let me tell you a little bit about today's guest. She's a music maker, she's a wind turbine dresser, and with what I think may be an unrivaled passion for offshore wind. When her university colleague and friend, the lovely Emma Burrow, introduced us, I knew that we needed Juliette's voice on Conversations in Clean Tech. After completing a bachelor's and master's in manufacturing engineering at the University of Cambridge, Juliette's career has gone from strength to strength. Working with the likes of EDF Energy, Ørsted, and now Equinor, she's enthusiastic, she's driven, a self-confessed energy geek. And on that note, it's my great pleasure to introduce the wonderful Juliette Sanders and today's episode of Conversations in Clean Tech. Hi, Juliette.
Hi, Jenny. Hi, Marta. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really great to be here. Thanks.
Wonderful. Today's episode will cover everything from innovation in clean tech to offshore wind and the difference it's making globally, to the challenges in the sector, Juliette's incredible career, and finally, we might even find out what Juliette and Will Smith have in common, aside from a funky outfit or two. So Juliette, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Juliette. So, at the time of recording, I am currently head of communications for Equinor's renewable business in the UK. However, I am moving on to a new role in the new year, so that will be the start of 2022, which will be taking up Director of Strategic Comms at Energy UK.
And also, you're easily the biggest fan of wind technology that I know. But where did your particular interest in this technology come from?
So with offshore wind, actually, I kind of fell into it, really. I had been working in the nuclear industry for some time, and then I'd taken a job at what was Dong Energy, Danish oil and natural gas, not just for the funny name. And they were an oil and gas company, but also making big strides in offshore wind at the time. But I think at that time, really, no one even in industry knew how much the technology was going to expand so quickly, and largely due to the costs coming down as well. So I joined Dong as it was, but over the time that I was there, the company underwent a huge transformation. They sold off their oil and gas business. They renamed the company to Ørsted, and by far became the biggest offshore wind developer in the world. And so it became everything that I kind of lived and breathed for a long time, and that's how I got into offshore wind.
Amazing. And now I'm quite intrigued, not just about the offshore wind, but the fact that you went to university and loved it enough to stay on and do your master's in manufacturing engineering, and then you made the switch to comms. And I know we talked before about the importance of doing what you love, and when you do what you love, you're successful. But how did you go from the engineering to the comms? It's always an interesting story to hear people's transition.
Absolutely, and your mantra is something that I strongly believe in, is that people should do what they enjoy, and that is definitely how they will be successful. So I was always quite good at maths when I was a kid, so I studied further maths and physics at college, and my maths teacher, I was going to go on to study maths at uni, and she sort of said, you maybe want to do something a bit more applied, it will suit you a bit more, than the pure maths. So I went on to do engineering, which I then found out was maths, basically. So it was more maths for 2 years. General engineering was the course that I did. And then in the third year, you had the opportunity to specialise. And that was really the first time that I made the decision to do something that I loved over something that I thought that I should do, because I think there was the options for me at that time were between sort of carrying on with a traditional engineering subject, so structural engineering, civil engineering, mechanical, something like that, where I could be chartered, or the university that I went to offered this course, manufacturing engineering, and that was a bit more, widespread. It was about strategy, product design, going into businesses and solving sort of real world problems. But I was a bit worried it was perceived as a bit of a woolly course, because I wouldn't necessarily be able to get chartered. But I took the decision to do that course, and I'm so glad that I did, because I really enjoyed it, and I ended up doing really well, I think, because I enjoyed it. So then at the end of that, at the end of uni, I joined a grad scheme at EDF Energy. So I was employed as an energy analyst, and but you were allowed one kind of wacky placement as part of that. So I did 6 months with the media team, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't even know that companies had media teams, and I just, I tried this thing out, and I just really enjoyed it. It just really kind of suited my personality. It was really fast paced. I was learning all the time, meeting really great people. I hadn't really written anything. Probably, for most of my degree, I hadn't, done any writing. So it wasn't necessarily that I was, actually a really great comms person in terms of the writing, but it just, the logistical element and always being out and about. And I think the fast pacedness really attracted me. And then I went back to do my final couple of placements, and I felt like I was really out of the loop. All these company announcements were coming out, and I was like, hey, what's going on? So I was really, really lucky that at the end of the grad scheme, they had a role going in the comms team, in the media team, and they took a huge chance on me. I didn't have any media experience apart from the 6 months that I'd done with the team, and I was very fortunate that they could see that it was actually the passion and the energy that would kind of get me through that, and that I could learn on the job. And so then I ended up doing 3 years there, looking after Dungeness-B nuclear power station, doing the communications there, and then my career's been in communications ever since.
Amazing. And as someone that didn't have that maths teacher and just went and did pure maths at university, I wish I'd done engineering.
Well, I mean, I didn't even, to be honest, I should have looked more at what it was, because I was quite shocked that when I got there, it was hard maths. And I had all my friends that were doing architecture, and they were kind of building huts down by the river. And I was like, oh, maybe I should have done that, actually. But, I think it is difficult, not only when you go to uni, what subject to study and all of that, but then also when you leave uni. And this is why, again, I was talking about grad schemes, but, there are other ways in, but just trying to work out what it is you want to do when you don't even know what those roles are is so difficult. So, but I think it is important that people don't worry that whatever they study at uni will then have to be what they do for the rest of their life, because, I'm an example of that being not true.
Me too. And even for people that don't go to university and choose to do something totally different, I think we live in a world now where the job for life has gone, and people's careers take weird and wonderful paths, and most of us, as I did and you did, kind of fall into a sector and then fall into a role and kind of wait until you find the one that clicks, and when it does, then that's where you stay for a while. And who knows what's in store for us in the future. Maybe Marta and I will be making a shift into offshore wind.
Yeah. Come join. We need more women.
Well, on the note of offshore wind, before we get on to the topic of women, one of the things that we like to do in this podcast is have it a bit educational. So our listeners aren't all in clean tech already, and they're certainly not all working in offshore wind. So we like to do a kind of ground up the 101. So can you give us a bit of an insight into the sector, not just what it is, but the importance of it and where it fits in the wider spectrum of the energy transition?
Absolutely. How long have you got? No, I'm joking. So offshore wind, as I said, has grown hugely over the last decade. So our first offshore wind farm in the UK was in the year 2000. And in that time, we've managed to build about 11 gigawatts of offshore wind power in the UK. So the UK is the world leader in this amazing technology, which means that we've got more capacity than any other country. And that's largely due to the geographical elements. We're an island. It's one of the windiest places in Europe, in the world. But it's also thanks to the way that the government policy has enabled the industry to grow. And so industry and government working together, with various mechanisms like the contracts for difference, which I won't go into now because we probably haven't got enough time, but by these kind of financial mechanisms, essentially, that provide longer term clarity on what the costs will be in the future, then it enabled these companies to invest in the UK at very, very early stages. And then that in turn has enabled the supply chain. It's enabled much bigger wind farms, and that's brought the cost down hugely. And as the cost goes down, then it becomes more economical to install. So at the minute, as I said, we've got about 11 gigawatts of offshore wind in the UK. And the government and industry has set a target as part of the sector deal, the offshore wind sector deal. that by 2030, we'll aim for 40 gigawatts of offshore wind. So if you just take a minute to think about what that means, it's taken us 20 years to get to 10, 11 gigawatts. And we're saying over the next decade, we're going to quadruple that. So it's a huge challenge ahead of us. But I think that we will get there because the technology is absolutely amazing. So when I first joined the industry in 2016, sorry, I'm such an energy geek, as we said at the beginning. So do just stop me if I start talking too much. So yeah, when I joined in 2016, I think the biggest sort of turbines on the market were the 7 megawatts. And I remember doing an announcement about the 8 megawatt machines that were going to go in a Burbo Bank extension, and they were kind of the cutting edge technology at the time. But now we're seeing, 12, 13, 14 megawatt turbines, and these are huge, so they're taller than the gherkin, the tower. The blades are 107 meters long, so that's like 9.5 buses back to back. You can fit an elephant in the root of the blade, not that you ever would want to or be able to actually get one in, but yeah, and but I find the stat that I love telling people, because it's really easy to comprehend. I think, you can talk about gigawatts as much as you like, and 3.6 gigawatt capacity. Well, it doesn't really mean much to a lot of people, but this stat really, I think, hits home to a lot of people that aren't in industry, that one rotation of an offshore wind turbine now can power a UK home for over 2 days. So that's just one spin can power a UK home for over 2 days. And that is really impressive. And I said, as I said at the beginning, looking back to how that compares, just to 2016, so it's not that long ago, then it was one rotation could power a UK home for 1 day. So you can already see this innovation that's happening in industry. And then there's loads of new and exciting technologies around that as well. There's floating offshore wind. That's a super exciting technology to look out for, because that means that you can not only access further out to sea. So, for example, there's applications where you can decarbonize oil and gas platforms, electrify them and have them running from the offshore wind. But also it opens up new markets that have deeper coastlines. So previously they wouldn't have been able to have offshore wind because the technology meant that it wouldn't be able to be installed around their coastlines. But actually with floating offshore wind, it means that you can bring renewables to these new countries. So lots and lots of exciting things, lots and lots of growth ambitions, and yeah, a really great industry to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fantastic. And also, you've mentioned a lot about how government policies have helped the industry and the growth that different companies have had. But we're actually recording this episode during COP26, although people will be listening to it a while later. But in that vein, apart from, government responsibility and corporate responsibility, I think we can all agree that we all kind of have a collective responsibility for the future of the planet. So in your opinion, what do you think each of us can do to help tackle climate change?
On a personal level, I think we have options as citizens and as consumers. That's where our choices kind of lie, so we can choose to work in an industry that's tackling climate change, but also in our day-to-day choices and our day-to-day lives, then we can make those choices that are better for the planet. So I only use kind of plant-based cleaning products and things like that. I'll always try and take the train. I'll never fly, within the UK. And I've set myself these little things that I do myself. And I think collectively we can all make those little efforts. But then as citizens, I think then we also have this responsibility, and that's to learn the facts, that's to be engaged within it, and that's to understand where as citizens we can put pressure on to make the right choices, both at a political level and at an industry level as well.
Definitely. I think it definitely does lie within choices that you make as an individual, as part of a community. But going back to your personal choice in your career, I mean, I agree. I personally feel that communication is a key aspect of achieving common goals. I studied communication and media, so it's also something that I'm really passionate about. But I wanted to ask you how you use, your communication skills to spread the word about energy transition, because a little birdie told me that you'd not only do this as your job, but pretty much all the time. And I think it'd be a shame for our listeners not to know how you promoted wind tech at a festival here in the UK.
Yeah, so I'll take a step back. So obviously communicating about offshore wind, that's my job at the minute, at the time of recording, and and as I said, I live and breathe it. I'm a massive geek, so I love learning, and then I love telling people what I learned. So it started really, I tell taxi drivers, did you know one rotation can power a home for over 2 days? And then about a year ago, I started doing Christmas cards with that were related to offshore wind on, and inside I'd put one rotation can power home for over 2 days, and I kind of like this kind of guerrilla marketing, trying to be. I'm quite a creative person anyway, so I guess I tried to kind of pull that in, and over lockdown last year, and I think this is what you're referring to. So over lockdown last year, I started a project called Killah, Jules, because I was very bored and trapped inside like the rest of us. And so that was basically bringing together my passion for music and my passion for offshore wind. And so I did a number of offshore wind covers. So The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, sharing the link to Will Smith. But there's a few other covers as well on my YouTube channel. But even down to, and I've got them on today because we were recording this, but I've got these little wind turbine earrings that even move. So my friend made me these, but again, it's just, it's trying to think, how can we engage people in it? Because for a lot of people, energy is quite boring, but actually there's loads and loads of really exciting things happening in our industry, and to say that the UK is a global leader in a renewable technology, people should know that, and not a lot of people do. So I think by doing things like this, the idea with these was that people would ask about them, and then you can get into a conversation, and I really like that element of trying to think a bit creatively about how we can engage. So to explain your comment about the festival as well, so earlier this year I went to End of the Road Festival, and I dressed up as a wind turbine but again, that was again so that I could engage with people, and it had a much wider impact than what I thought it would have. It was really well accepted there, to the extent that I'd gone up to one lady just to say, can I tell you a fact about wind energy? And she said, actually, I think I already know it because you bumped into my friend yesterday and they told me. And I was like, yes, that is all that I wanted to achieve, is that this little fact was getting spread around. So I think if we want to engage people, then we need to start thinking a bit more creatively about it. And it's not just, it's not just so that we can spread facts. It's so that we can attract people to the industry as much as anything, so that people understand the scope and the breadth and the growth potential of this industry and get engaged and interested in it.
It's awesome. And also, I think we were going to put you on the spot and ask you for a rap, but I feel too mean, so we're not going to. But for our listeners, wherever we're publicizing this, we will put the link to your YouTube channel so people can go and have a listen, because you gave us a real giggle, but also it's got some great facts in there. So well worth the listen. And also, we will certainly do our best to share a picture of you dressed up as the wind turbine as well, because no one should miss that either.
Thank you. My dad was like, what did your friends go as? I was like, nothing. It was just me dressing up. And he was like, did anyone pay you? I was like, no, I just love it that much.
Oh, that's amazing. Also, I want to go back to something that Jen mentioned earlier, and that you touched on briefly, which is the importance of having women in the sector. Which is a topic that we've discussed at length before, something that I'm really passionate about. And it's also just more broadly needing representation for all walks of life in the sector, not specifically women, but talking about balanced representation and gender representation in the sector, what it would mean for the future of energy and then the future of the planet. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, really.
So the energy industry has traditionally been very male dominated, but we are working really hard to try and change that. And I think no one will argue that we still have a long way to go within that, but there is a lot of work going on to try and improve diversity across all sides, not just gender diversity. So offshore wind, for example, has 18% women in 2020. As part of this sector deal, they've set a target to have 33% women by 2030 with an ambition for 40%. Now that's still not even 50%, but it's great to see those kinds of targets in place. And I think some of the things that we can do to try and encourage other women into the sector are to share these amazing jobs that are there, to promote role models within industry. Role models are so important because people need to see themselves in these senior roles. If I look up and all I can see is white senior males, then I'm probably not going to think that that's a role that I can do myself. But if we can promote these, engaging role models, and as I said, it's not just women, it's diversity of all kinds, so that people can see themselves in these roles, but also the breadth of roles available. It's not just about being a wind turbine technician. The way that the wind industry works now, mostly people will go offshore for 2 weeks and then come back for 2 weeks if you're working offshore. That may not fit with some women's patterns, if they've got kids and things like that, but there are so many other jobs that you can get involved in. It's not just about being a technician. There's lots of office-based jobs, there's lots of construction jobs, onshore as well. So I think role models is a big way. I think setting these targets is important to show that the industry is serious about it as well. A lot of companies now, they'll refuse to take part in a panel unless it's a diverse range on a panel. And I think that's something that people can do. And, and companies setting themselves targets, Energy UK have set a target so that they don't have any all white panels either. And that's really important. And I think, so there's lots of work happening. but there is still a long way to go. And I think it's very important to have women in the sector, because you need that diversity of thought, right? If you have a homogeneous group making decisions, then everybody's going to think the same. And we have to innovate. We have a big task ahead of us if we're going to get to net zero by 2050. So we need all these bright, creative minds, and it's about being innovative. And you need diversity of mind to be able to do that. And also because these jobs are really cool, so women should know about them so that they get a chance to be in them too.
I couldn't agree more. Actually, Marta and I both went to an event together yesterday, and it wasn't offshore wind, have to confess. It was a hydrogen event at the Science Museum, which, as massive geeks, science geeks, we loved. However, we were on our way up to a panel event, which I must say, actually, the moderator was female and brilliant. And it was a 3-person panel, of which one of whom was a woman. And it was a brilliant panel. In the lift on the way up to this speech, we were two of, I want to say, around 20 people in a lift, and we were the only females in this lift. So I guess it showed both things. It showed that we're not there. There's a huge way to go, but from an event perspective, and creating these role models, the industry is pushing. So they are showing these brilliant, successful women in the sector with a view to getting their name out there and getting their profile out there and showing that they can do it. But the audience, I think, was a true reflection of where we are and how much we need to push that. And I think we all need to take this responsibility to make sure that we're showing, there are fantastic opportunities out there, whether that is on an oil rig, perhaps not, whether it's on a construction site. I hope so, because that's changing, but also just showing that, you can make a huge impact to a sector by recruiting into it, by communicating what's happening in it. It doesn't have to be a specific tech role or a specific engineering role, although I would strongly advocate more females to go and study engineering, because it gives you that grounding, whether you decide to stay on and continue a career as an engineer, or like yourself, take that knowledge and that insight that you've got and use it in a different way.
Absolutely. And although I don't use the kind of math side of my engineering, that problem solving approach to things I've certainly taken on within my role going forward. And also coming back to what you were saying about, the audience, I've certainly seen a change in the time that I've been in the industry. There has been a change. And as you say, very noticeable on the panels and the people that are speaking there. And Renewable UK have this thing called a switch list, which is really cool. So women can sign up, so that it's basically for women and I think all forms of diversity, really, to sign up so that people can go to this list if they need people on a panel and see who the experts are from maybe not the selection that they would normally go to automatically. So I think initiatives like that are really, really important to make sure that we have a good representation of people across the industry.
And actually, I think next week, which will be 3 weeks prior to when this actually goes out, there's a really interesting panel event, which I will also try and share the link to with this, which is the future of women in energy. And exactly as you were saying around the goals, and how if we don't have diversity of thought and we don't have a true representation of all of the people that are consuming energy, we'll never get there. So we need to have that mix. And I think it's going to be a great panel. I was actually fortunate enough to be asked to be on the panel, but unfortunately can't make it. But there's some fantastic people talking, and I think there'll be some really, really interesting topics that come out of that. So I shall try to share that link with this episode.
Also, Juliette, something that I was really curious about is, obviously you mentioned that you're really passionate about, offshore wind tech, but more widely about, energy transition and things like that. I think personally it's really exciting to be part of a movement that is making such a positive impact on the planet. And also it's just something that I think really helps attract new people into the industry, whether it's, people that are just starting at university, people halfway through their career. I think it's a really good selling point. But how does it feel for you personally to be part of a movement that's making such a positive impact in the planet now, and also for future in the years to come?
Really great question. It is such an exciting time to be in energy. So exciting. What the changes and the transformation that the energy industry is going to have to go through over the next decade even is transformational, and that's why we need all these bright and innovative minds to join us in this challenge. If you look at offshore wind alone, and this is, well, I guess more jobs, but there's 26,000 people working in offshore wind at the minute. in the next 5 years, we're going to need over 69,000 people. So there's huge growth potential. So there's lots and lots of exciting opportunities through that. But also I think now, and probably especially after COVID, I think a lot of people are looking for a job with purpose. And I think that's what the energy industry offers. It offers, as you said, it's quite nice wording actually, part of a movement. And it really is about that. It's about, working together to make real positive change. And, and there are challenges along the way, like for sure there are challenges along the way. And the energy industry has to solve those, with offshore wind, as I said, for example, to go from 10 gigawatts to 40 gigawatts, what is that build out going to look like? How do we make sure that we do it sustainably? Those kinds of questions do require innovative minds to solve. So yeah, there's loads and loads of opportunities for long-term careers, but also I think if you're looking for a career with purpose, then the energy industry as a whole it's great to join. And it's not really just about flocking to the renewables, because oil and gas is going to have to get there too. If we are really going to reach net zero, we need to decarbonize oil and gas, and we need to get, bright minds in those areas too. So really, I think it's about all jobs across all of the energy industry and people who really want to make a difference. But that's why it's such a pleasure working here, because, you meet people who are really, really passionate about what they do. And it's always nice when you work along, like-minded people that really care about what they're doing.
Yeah, actually, I think that really resonates with myself and Jen, and also, the wider mission that Brightsmith has, because our tagline is live your purpose. And I think, it's very much more rewarding to have a career where you feel like you're fulfilling the purpose that you have and that you feel inspired. But I was also curious, you've mentioned, the transition you had from an engineering background into a communications role, but who or what has inspired you to, take that path?
Hard question, that one. So I think initially I had really, really good managers at EDF Energy. Like I said, they took a chance on me when I knew nothing. Well, I'd done the 6 months in media, but they gave me a role and basically taught me everything that I know on the job. And I remember having this conversation with the lady that was hiring, who then became my manager, and I wasn't going to apply. And again, at that point, it was a toss-up between that and an analytical role. And I was really I think the media role was less money as well. And I was like, oh, what should I do? I think I'll enjoy this one more, but this one's probably better for my long-term career. I didn't want to waste my degree and all of this stuff. But I just remember her saying to me, if you've got energy, intelligence and enthusiasm, and that's all we need, and we can work with the rest. And I think that was really inspiring to me, and that's something that I've always tried to take on when I've been hiring people. It's not necessarily to look at what experience they have, what qualifications they have, because it's more really about how are they going to work in the role. And if they're enthusiastic about it, then they're going to always do the best job that they can. So I think that certainly inspired me to sort of get into media. And then I'm really lucky, I've had loads of brilliant female role models across industry. So some are more in tech roles. So I've mentioned actually to you guys before, Bridget Hartland-Johnson. She's one of my biggest inspirations. I think she's just really cool. She's so clever. She works in battery storage, but she does a lot for younger women in the industry, and sort of she's taken a lot of us kind of under her wing, and there's a little gaggle of us that kind of follow her around and really look up to her. And she's always got our backs, but as I said, she's really clever as well. And it's really inspirational to see somebody that's that down to earth, but that's so clever as well, and such a geek, but actually, can just explain it in a really normal way. And yeah, so she's been a big inspiration to me as well.
I'm thinking, I guess you were just doing some reflecting there, but going back through your career as an entirety, are there any real kind of peak moments, any real highlights other than the wind turbine at the festival, which honestly I just
Yes, one of my biggest career highlights was at Ørsted, when I was able to take a BBC film crew offshore. So I worked on this half-an-hour programme called Powering Britain, and they went around various different technologies. But as part of that, I was able to go offshore and stay at the world's biggest offshore wind farm at the time, Hornsea 1. So I got to stay 120 kilometres offshore on a jack-up vessel. So jack-up vessels they're boats that kind of sail along, and then they put the legs down on the seabed, and then they jack themselves up so that it's really stable. So I got to stay on one of those, and then I got to go up to the top of a turbine. It was really cool. But I'm the sort of person where I really buzz off a challenge, and that was a very, very challenging project to work on. I was trying to organise logistics for somewhere that I'd never been before, working out how we're going to get from the turbine to this boat, and so many different stakeholders involved, plus all the media training for all the people, and making sure that everybody knew what was happening, plus all the safety elements. So it was a real challenging, but I really, really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of that experience, really, really rewarding. And then obviously, lots of pride when I got to watch it at the end. But again, there was lots of training that I had to do for that. And that was, the training in itself was super exciting for somebody like me who doesn't get to go offshore that much. I bet it's probably a pain in the bum for all the people that have to do it every 2 years. But but the training to go offshore, it's very intense because the industry has very, very high and strict safety standards. So you have to refresh every 2 years, and it's everything from sea survival, where you're in a pool and the lights are out and there's flashing lightning noises, to I had to do a helicopter underwater training where you get dunked in a pool in a helicopter, turned upside down, you've got to get out through the window, all this sort of stuff. So that was just, for a comms person to have those kinds of experiences, it was, it was really, really amazing. But I think, working in comms, it's, the challenges, the crises are as much, a rewarding experience as the actual positive things that you get to do. Because actually, when you can weather a crisis and, and you're protecting the company that you work for, and, and you're right in there in the middle of some kind of emergency, then, I guess I'm maybe an adrenaline junkie, but, you get that buzz from that as well. So I think I've been really lucky in my career that it's spanned, some really high profile, nice pieces like the BBC stuff, but then, we've also done stuff with Newsround or with Fully Charged, or, it's had a nice range of the two. And then, serious things like emergency exercises in the nuclear industry, nuclear industry, of course, safety is, it's the top priority. So they train a lot. They have these nuclear exercises where they play out that there's a nuclear emergency, in real time. You've got hundreds of people playing. And they're a great experience to take part on. Hopefully we'll never have to have a real one, but it's, that training is so important as well. So yeah, loads of highlights. So one of the funniest days that I had, because one of the things about the job is you really never know what it's going to be when you get into the office. Well, hopefully most days you try and stick to the plan, but because of comms is can be quite reactive. Something can come in from any point at any time, and I'd gone in, and then all of a sudden there was this story about bird poo on transition pieces, and then I had to become an expert in guano in a day. I'd never even heard the word guano before, but that is what I love about the job, is that you're constantly learning that, there may be something that you literally knew nothing about the day before, and within a day you're speaking to experts trying to get as much information from them as possible so that then you can brief other people. So yeah, it's a great job for people that like to learn.
Amazing. And I was going to ask you about challenges, but actually you kind of did the perfect thing there of talking about how the challenges were probably the highlights of your career, because I think a lot of people have this where, the easy stuff doesn't really stand out. It's the things that you didn't think you could do and then you found a way to achieve that really do stand out in the end, and they give you the greatest reward. And I think that kind of links back to what we were saying about not needing to have studied or, been a real expert in what you start in. It's the challenges along the way that really kind of make you who you are.
Absolutely. And it's how you handle them. I remember having this media moment, and there was a girl in my team, bless her. So in comms, you have to go on call quite often to handle out of hours incidents. And there was a girl in my team, and it was her first ever night on call, because we'd swapped a shift because I was going out and I was, and I was on the train going to Bristol to see my friends. And she called me at 6:30 and said that something had happened. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'm not sure that's a big issue, but just, call this guy and check. And in the time when she was calling the project director, I had all the media kind of calling me, and all of a sudden it became this big media storm. It was actually about a power cut a couple of years back. And that was one of the most challenging things that I'd ever had to deal with, and I had my team member remotely, I was on a train, you're there kind of tethering outside the train station, trying to sort out all these things at once. And, but I'll never forget that, actually. It was, and I learned a lot, and she learned a hell of a lot in that time, because it was, when you're thrown in at the deep end and all of a sudden you're briefing national journalists, and you've never done that before, but you have to. But I remember saying to her, and that was something that I was really proud of, because I was a fairly new manager at the time. But I remember saying to her right before, we split up the journalists to call them, which ones we were going to call. And I said, no matter what you do, you can't say anything wrong. I was like, this is on me. We're working as a team together. Even if you say something that becomes a headline, in the paper, you're protected and it's fine. And I think it's really important to kind of give your team members that, not protection necessarily, but enable them to operate in a way where they're not scared, because it's when people have fear, that's when they're going to make mistakes. So I think that would be my top tip for a crisis for anybody, is just to try and reassure the team that you are a team and that you're working together, because it's that fear of, oh God, I'm going to do something wrong, that then makes people make mistakes, I think. So yeah, I think that's really important in a crisis.
Definitely, I completely agree. And also, I think it's just so inspiring to hear you talk about your career and even the challenges as something that you're so passionate about and that you take on with such a good attitude. So just thank you for being such a brilliant guest on the first episode I've co-hosted. I feel like I'm really lucky. But I did want to ask you one last question before, we let you get back to telling the world about the wonders of offshore wind, which is absolutely necessary. I think you should never stop doing that. It's what's the one message you would like to leave with our listeners? Anything that you would like to tell them, especially considering that not everyone that listens to this is in clean tech or not everyone is the same age. Anything that you would like to tell them?
Oh, tough one. I would say kind of what we were saying earlier, really. I think do follow what you like to do, for sure. That is the easiest way to become successful, is to do what you like, but also to be authentic as well. I think that's something that's really important to me. And I think sometimes the way that I approach things is very much more in line with my personality than how things have been done before, or, what maybe the expected way of doing things is. But I think that's enabled me to get to where I am today, for sure. And it just makes my working life a lot easier. I am who I am at work as well as outside of work. So I would say, I used to have a mentor and he used to say, be authentic. What did he say? He'd say, be authentic as much as you can, or something. I can't remember what it was. It was I can't remember what the exact word was. That's going to really annoy me. But yeah, it was something like push the boundaries within reason. But I think it's about being authentic and doing what you love. I'd say they're the two things. Sorry, you only asked for one, but I always like to push it.
Definitely, no. You can give 1, 2, 30. I mean, I feel like we could talk for ages.
Oh, well, Juliette, thank you so much. And I echo that. Be your authentic self. It doesn't matter if everybody else in your industry is a certain way. If you're a different way, be that different way, and it will make you successful, and it also will make you happy. So yeah, I think that's amazing. So thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being authentic. We promise to gather all of these bits and pieces that we've talked about through the show and share them with the listeners. And we wish you every success in your mission to spread the word of offshore wind.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. It was a real pleasure to speak with you. And my new job will be about the wider energy system. So you never know, we may get some kilojoules tracks about different forms of energy as well. Who knows? But thank you again.
Thanks, Juliette.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Conversations in Clean Tech, brought to you by Brightsmith. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Every time you do, it helps others to find the show. For more information on Brightsmith and how we can help you to build a sustainable future through identifying, attracting, and retaining diverse talent, head over to brightsmith.com. Join us next time for more Conversations in Clean Tech.